Okay, so we'll just wait a few more minutes and see who else can join us tonight. Hopefully we'll get a few more people coming on. Always a bit of a rush coming home on a Friday. Hello, Susan.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, all good.
Yvonne's just coming on. That's awesome. We'll just give it a few minutes for everybody to get set.
Totally. Yeah.
Yep. Hi, Yvonne.
Hello.
Oh, there's Danny.
Hi, I made it.
Awesome.
Haven't had dinner this time yet.
Oh no. Do you want to run and get something?
Oh no, it's
Okay.
fine. I'll be fine. Thank you though. Yeah.
We'll just give it a few more minutes and see if Tiffany or any of the other ladies are going to join us. It's only 5:02 and it's a Friday. Yay for Friday.
Go invisible for a moment.
I hope everybody had a decent day today. It was a weird day. Walked into stores without a mask on. That felt very strange. Very strange.
I thought we had to wear masks in healthcare facilities.
Yes, in healthcare facilities, you still have to wear masks, but in like the grocery store or like little shops and things, it's up to the store.
Oh yeah.
And I know some have decided to keep masks for a while longer, and others are just asking people to use hand sanitizer. But man, did it ever feel strange?
I know
Walked in
it's,
there, felt naked.
that happened last year too around summertime.
Yeah. Yeah. Not feeling much like summertime today.
No.
Cold and fugly. How is the Yukon today? Oh, you're still muted. Yeah. You're still muted. There you go.
The blizzard blew itself out finally overnight.
Oh my goodness.
And we have sun.
Oh,
And
that'd be nice.
it's beautiful when it's like this, but it's -13 with sun. But it's really nice.
Mm.
Yeah.
Kind of a double-edged sword there, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I do like the sun though, even if it's cold.
Oh yeah.
Kind of nice to have that. You feel a lot more energy those days.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's 5:05 and I think we'll get started because we were really super late last night and I don't want to be that disrespectful of your time. So let's get going, and if people join us, they join us, and we'll just go from here. So again, find a nice comfortable spot in your chair. Get your back sorted. Make sure that the small of your back is nicely supported. Put your feet flat on the floor. Wiggle your toes a few times so that you can really feel when you stop, you can really feel attached to the floor. Then try to find a comfortable spot for your hands and your arms so that really your whole body is supported and you don't have to think about anything hurting or being uncomfortable. And we'll just do our centering meditation. Let's take a deep breath in for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. And hold the breath for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. And blow out through your mouth for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. And hold your breath for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now just breathe regularly. I love knowing all is well. I love being part of a like-minded community that is always moving forward towards expansion and raising the vibration of the planet with their heart-centered thoughts and beliefs. I appreciate the rain. I appreciate the fresh air that the rain brings. I appreciate the sunshine that will follow the rain. I appreciate every moment alive. I love my life. I live joyfully expanding. I love how attraction works. I love to attract friends and money. I love beautiful conversations. And I really, really like the feeling of love flowing through me and my grid, filling to its brim and spilling over. Earth is where the heart is. Deep breath in. And exhale. And when you're ready, come back into the room. So welcome back to day 2 of the Burnout Boot Camp. And I'm hoping that you didn't have a difficult evening last night after all of the things that we talked about. Hopefully you were able to get some sleep without millions of thoughts running through your head. But if you didn't, that's okay. We're working on it. We're works in progress. So we'll come back to our definition of burnout, because this is our reminder of the definition that we're taking with us on this journey to see how it evolves over time for us. And I like this one, like I said last night, because it is kind of all-encompassing. It is a mind and body system dis-ease that it describes. And it's a dis-ease with the reality that we've created. And it's not a judgment to say that we've created the reality that we're experiencing. In fact, it's a liberating statement, because if we've created it, we can create another better one that really allows us to put ourselves first and to honor the needs of our bodies and our spirits, and to provide the best possible results from the heart work that we do every day. And it's in the best interest of ourselves and our patients and our families and our communities and our organizations that we honor and value our own well-being in the work that we do. So this definition really speaks to the all-encompassing nature of it. It's about being emotionally, mentally, and physically distressed by the kind of work and the volume of work that we do every day. And it talks about the cumulative nature of this stress as it continues to build over time if it's not addressed. And the biggest thing is what it does to us mentally and physically. It leaves us questioning fundamentally if we should still continue to do this work, if it's really worth it to do this work in terms of the toll that it takes on us, and leaving us without energy to actually try to recuperate some of that resilience that we've lost. So burnout really is this kind of open drain of all of our resources, and we have to try to figure out a way to plug the drain so that we can fill our bathtub with all the energy that we need to continue doing the work that we're doing. And it's not to say that it's that this means that you continue in the actual job that you're in. You may decide at a later date that it's not for you, but it's the actual work that we do as in a system, whether it's this particular job or other work that we do. Because what I know is that doesn't matter where we are, we take ourselves with us. So if we don't deal with the things that we ignore, if we don't deal with us ignoring ourselves and we go somewhere else, we just take all that with us and we repeat the pattern until we stop doing the same thing over and over again. I'm a big one for not doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So today is an interesting module. Because when I talked to a lot of my colleagues when I was first starting this about what it was they felt that they needed to learn and what they felt they needed to change, people pleasing came up in every single conversation I had. So this was a big one here. So today what we're going to talk about, we're going to focus on the personal traits of people who people please, and then talk about why we may be doing this. And then what does it mean for our volume of work and our sense of overwhelm and our sense of efficiency and efficacy when we do people pleasing things. Okay. Now, what is people pleasing? So it's always good for a definition. So people pleasers tend to put the needs and work of other people before their own, oftentimes in attempt to avoid conflict. Okay, so this can lead people to not being able to complete their own tasks or do personal things because they're doing things for other people and then they feel overwhelmed. So by the end of this lesson, this section, we're going to be able to identify the traits of people pleasers. And there's a couple of sections in this module. So for this one, we're just going to talk about what are the traits of people pleasing. And I did send out an email today with a little rate from 1 to 10 some traits. So it's a very helpful thing and we'll get to a slide with that on it. It's a very helpful thing to see the traits in concrete form. So let's first talk about here some reasons that people would do people pleasing behaviors. Then there are several main reasons. Fear of rejection is a big one. Insecurity is a big one. All of these are big ones. Needing to feel well liked. So it goes to your sense of validation. So needing approval and validation from other people. So really craving that external validation and not having it internally. But there's also a fear of missing out. That was a big one for me. If I wasn't participating in something, well, people would make decisions and then I wouldn't have had any input. So I'll just do the work and I'll take that job on, right? Sometimes it comes from a lack of confidence. And often, it comes from feelings of unworthiness. And this can include imposter syndrome, which is a subset of feeling of unworthiness. Okay. But there's an even bigger reason here for women. Our cultural conditioning is from the time we are little girls to please other people. And I haven't put it in the list because it's a cultural condition and we can change that through our rearing of children. How we rear our children can change the cultural conditioning of people-pleasing behavior. But it's important to acknowledge that the cultural conditioning does exist and it's entrenched. It's so entrenched in us and can be can fuel that need to people please and be a source of some resistance and pushback you feel internally as you try to change this behavior in yourself. But it can also be a source of pushback externally from the system that you work in and the culture that you work in, which has come to rely on this behavior to get work done. So it's a really kind of a multifaceted piece of work. Now, much like burnout, there's a source of shame around people pleasing. And it's because it's really not a normalized conversation that we have that we do this and that we shouldn't do it. So when you don't normalize something and you don't talk about it, you internalize it that it must be you feeling these feelings. So it can become a source of shame for people if they internalize the behaviors. Especially if you know that that behavior has caused you to not get something else done or not achieve a goal that you wanted because you were doing something for someone else. So there are some personality traits that are very common amongst people pleasers. And not all, it doesn't mean that you have to have all of these to feel like you're a people pleaser, but some of these can be pretty big emotional triggers. And we're going to talk about where they come from and why they will be emotional triggers. But understand that this whole module, there is actually no judgment around whether or not you have these traits. It is just a way of identifying things so you can address them. Okay, so some of the personality traits: low self-worth, the feeling that you need to accommodate others' needs at the expense of your own, a fear of conflict, not being an assertive person. You may feel valuable when you're doing something for other people, which means you don't feel valuable when you're doing something for yourself oftentimes. You value praise from others. You say sorry when no apology needed. And not the Canadian kind of sorry that we say all the time, but more that like you're trying to placate someone by apologizing for something when there was no need for you to apologize. People pleasers can make excuses for the faults of other people. And oftentimes they have little self-awareness that they're doing this. Although they have some negative emotions around it, there's not a lot of investigation as to why that is. Resentment can be a big negative emotion here. So can you see yourself in some of these places? I certainly can. I think there's a lot of self-worth tied up in doing for other people, especially in healthcare, because our job is doing for other people, which makes perfect sense when you look at why we don't do for ourselves then, because we're so busy doing for others that we haven't got it left to do for ourselves. But this slide really is just an acknowledgement that these things can exist. And so just try to distance yourself from all the conversation today. Try to be that mountaintop view or the narrator view so that you're not getting really emotionally involved in the traits, and we can dissect them a bit cleaner. But do know that if there are some emotional responses, to honor those. Okay, so the question really is people pleasing causing or contributing to your burnout condition? Okay, because the definition of stress really is having more demands than you can handle. And people pleasing can actually turn into a vicious cycle of chronic stress and unhealthy behaviors, and then unhealthy responses and more people pleasing, and it just becomes this vicious circle. And if you have a constant feeling like you're too busy and doing everything for everyone else but yourself, you might be stuck in this cycle. Okay. And so the question is, what conditions can you see here that can initiate people-pleasing behaviors? Like if you're at work, what kind of situations could you imagine where you would feel the need to please people? Do you not like conflict? Do you not like it when people are upset? And so you step in to soothe. There's a lot of different things that people do around this. But the interesting thing is that people pleasing is also a self-soothing activity. It's very much like using, it can be at its extreme, very much like using drugs or alcohol or shopping or any other addictive behavior, because you're trying to avoid discomfort, yours or other people's. And so you self-soothe or you mask it in this behavior. And if we don't have to deal with the emotional toll because of the conflict that we're experiencing, because we step in and people please, then it becomes really quite a destructive and limiting behavior. Okay, so it's really important to remember that the reason that a lot of the reason that we do people please is because it soothes our anxiety about things. So there's just a couple of things that we need to differentiate with, because it's not about not doing things for other people. There's a difference between being big-hearted and being a people pleaser. So big-hearted helpers, people who help out other people and not in a people-pleasing way, they tend to have a healthy self-regard. And the most important thing is they fulfill their own emotional needs first, and then will step in to help other people. And they come from a place of love. Whereas people pleasers look after other people at their own expense. They put their own needs second or last, sometimes very last, and everybody else's first. They worry about what other people will think of them, oftentimes, and it comes from a place of fear, whether it's fear of conflict or fear of the team not succeeding or fear of being perceived as less than, but it comes from a place of fear rather than a place of love. So examining in advance this root cause of your people-pleasing behavior will help you before the next event of it. So if you create a canned response that you practice, it will help you when the situation arises. Because I'm a kind of person who, if I get caught unaware, I never say the thing that I think 5 minutes later, oh, that would have been a great thing to say, right? That would have been a great response. So what I started doing is thinking about times when I've experienced that and having kind of stock phrases. And we're going to talk about some of those as we go along here. Because it's really important to acknowledge that there is a place for helping other people, right? But it's not helping other people at the expense of our own stuff or our own well-being. It's a different emotional response, okay? So what you have to start to think about is, what are the emotional signs that you are doing big-hearted helping versus what are the emotional signs of people-pleasing? And if you have any anxiety or if you are worried or anything like that, you tend to be people-pleasing and not helping. If you had confidence and kind of a free feeling, if you were volunteering to help to do something, that would probably be because you had fulfilled your own emotional needs first and you felt magnanimous or helpful, right? So anytime you have anxiety or worry around doing something, you might want to investigate where the desire to do this thing comes from. Okay. But then there's also another kind of people pleaser personality. And I think we all have met one before. It's called the martyr. Okay, so martyrs are different than people pleasers in one key area. They actually draw a lot of attention to themselves and their self-sacrifice. Okay, it's so passive aggressive. It's a passive aggressive way of signaling that you're really overburdened and needing emotional support, and have a need for some deeper kind of an intervention. Okay, and this is a personality kind of person who's really committed to being unhappy and solid victim mentality. If things are being done to me, okay, we're not going to deal anymore with this personality because it actually does require like some actual therapy to get through to what it is why you are so committed to being in this victim role. So If you know of anybody that does this, or if you feel like you do this, then please, seek out some other help and start to incorporate that and this together. I'm just looking at the chat. We have signs of the big-hearted traits, and it's hard to admit that I'm firmly also in the people-pleasing side. Yes. You know what? It is hard to admit it, right? Because, we don't want to admit that we might be doing things for not necessarily a healthy reason. And it often comes from experiences we've had early in life. We're going to talk about why we're people pleasers in just a second. And then another comment, I feel like I have both sides of these as well in varying degrees, depending on the scenario. Yeah. And it's really good to be able to identify in the moment which one it is, right? Because what we're going to see in Leave Work at Work is if you can get rid of the anxiety driven, jumping in kind of people pleasing, where you're taking other work because you're just anxious and you're trying to look good, or you're trying to salvage something, you're going to have too much work on your plate and you're never going to be able to get ahead and do your own stuff because you're taking on other things all the time. We'll talk about that in Leave Work at Work and how to kind of manage that. So let's talk a minute about, am I a people pleaser? So this is the conversations with ourselves. And you may, as we're just talking about, you may find this as a really hard kind of admission that there's a side of you that is a people pleaser, or you might say, yeah, I kind of figured that already, because I often run into problems where I'm overloaded with work and half of it's not even my own. And it's interesting because we know that there can be some negative impacts to this kind of behavior. And so understanding how we respond in stressful situations, because a lot of this happens when there's lots of stuff coming at you and you're just kind of responding from a more primitive fight, flight, or fear kind of place. And you end up in a situation where you can't catch up. So to start to heal our burnout and strengthen ourselves against it happening again, we need to look at all the variables that go into how we got here and what are the things that contribute to our physical, emotional, and mental impact of stress. Okay. Either way, it's important to know if this is one of your emotional responses, whatever kind of condition you find yourself in. Okay. So we talked about personality traits already, what are kind of them: low self-worth, a desire to accommodate others' needs at the expense of your own, fear of conflict, not feeling assertive enough to say no, or not feeling capable or able to say no to something. So feeling disempowered and having to say yes to taking on other things that you don't feel are yours. But it also comes from feeling valuable for doing for others, and you derive value and good emotions from praise from other people for doing things. And the whole point about having little self-awareness is what we're dealing with right now, is trying to gain that bit of self-awareness to see what parts of this might actually impact you. So this is a slide that I sent out this morning to you. If you haven't had a chance to have a look at it, this is really good. So on a scale of 1 to 10, start to rank yourself on this slide, with 1 being never and 10 being always, and see how you kind of rate yourself here. I'll give you a couple minutes to do this. The one thing I'd like you to pick out of this list is the one thing you think is the biggest issue for you? And it might be hard to pick one, but just try to pick one. Yeah, fear of conflict. Mine is being a fixer. I like to fix things. I like to fix things so people aren't upset and aren't stressed and aren't hurt. And I've always been a fixer. Fear of conflict is a big one. I think the other one for me I've always been a good girl. Oh, and let's see, I expect myself to be perfect and feel tense, anxious, and on edge. Yes, perfectionism is a issue. And so especially if you are stepping in and volunteering in the, rapidly to take things on, and then all of a sudden now nothing is getting done to the place that you want it done, and you become more anxious, and that means you get less done, and that means you get more anxious, and it's just this horrible whirlpool of emotion and frustration. But there's two other things that happen. There are silent partners of people pleasing, and they are acknowledgement and resentment. So acknowledgement is really strong underlying trait in people pleasing personalities. And it comes to being seen as an exemplary leader or a great team player or the go-to person in an organization or the expert in that thing. And this acknowledgement means that you take on more work, and it becomes negatively impacting you because you can't get what you need to get done because you're constantly taking more, because you want that more acknowledgement of how great you are. And part of that, if you think of the saying, if you want something done, give it to a busy person, right? It's that constant drive and going forward. The other side of that is resentment. And resentment can come out in forms of passive aggressive behavior. And while it seems like it kind of be counterintuitive to the acknowledgement side, they often actually go hand in hand. You crave that acknowledgement about how good you are. And on the other hand, you resent the fact that you have to work so damn hard and take so much on because everybody else just leaves it to you. So it becomes, again, this kind of play back and forth. And resentment is a big one. So if you are feeling at all any resentment in a day, I'd go and uncover what was going on and what led up to you feeling resentful. For me, my biggest burnout need, something I discovered after about 3 months of really searching for it, is acknowledgement. I craved acknowledgement of the length of time that I was doing my work and the quality with which I was doing it. And so I actually believe that my need for this external acknowledgement is the main cause of my burnout. Because I was seeking something that was never going to come, and I shouldn't have needed it anyway. Okay. Let's see. So people pleasing, as weird as it sounds, is all about being a secret control freak, right? So while it might seem like it's an exercise, people pleasing is an exercise of giving your power away. In fact, it actually is you trying to control all of the things that are going around you. Okay. And because people start to rely on you to do things, people start to look to you as the great leader that you are. And so you are now controlling how people perceive you, and you are trying to control things that there is absolutely no way that you're going to be able to control. The volume of work, the change that comes through, all of those things that you have absolutely no control over, you're going to try to be controlling them through doing the work and taking it on yourself. instead of either saying it can't be done, something else has to get left, or somebody else has to do it. Okay. Because you're going to be telling yourself that you just need to do all this. And why can't you keep up? And your to-do list keeps growing and you keep working extra hours. And you lose the sense of being able to prioritize what's really important. And the other side of that is the thought that you can do it better anyway. Now, I like to tell everyone here at this point that I don't sew. And I don't sew because when I was in sewing class in grade 8, every time I came up to a problem, my mom would just fix it for me. Because she was, not only was she a people pleaser, but she had this lovely need to control what was going on. And it was quicker to do it herself. And she could do it better anyway. So she would just fix it. But I never learned how to sew because I never had to work through that problem myself. She just fixed it. So it is kind of passive aggressive in a way when you're thinking, well, I can do it. I'll just take that because I can do it quicker anyway, instead of letting someone else learn how to do something and going through the kind of painful evolution to learn how to do it. It might take longer, but if you never allow somebody else to do something, you're never going to have someone who can replace you when you're sick or when you're on vacation. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you go away, nobody can fill what you do. You come back and there's this avalanche of crap that you have to deal with because nobody else could do it because you couldn't never give up the work to let them do it. So people pleasing is not just about pleasing other people, but it's also about you believing that you can do it better and quicker, and you'll just get it. Let's just get it done. And that whole thing worked as it is, leads you to be resentful of the other people who you never let try because they're not doing it. And look at you, I'm so busy. Okay. And they'll resent you because they could feel that you undervalue their ability to do things or try or learn. So there's a lot tied up in people-pleasing behavior. And it's kind of, like I said, a self-fulfilling prophecy at one point.
Christina, can I
Yes.
ask a question here?
Sure. Yes.
What if you're trying to engage your team and ask them to help and do things, but they all sit back and go, no, that's your job. What's that?
So that is them knowing that you will do it.
Oh, because I do it so well?
No, because what happens is you've trained them really well to know that you will take things on that they won't. Right? Like there's a thing about people pleasing. Human beings are path of least resistance creatures. So if they think, so let's do a scenario. Someone comes and says, here's a project that needs to be done. What's the first thing that happens? Everybody gets really quiet. Or Danny puts up her hand and says, I'll do it.
I'll do it.
Right? But everybody else is quiet because they know Danny's going to do that. Like you learn really quickly how long it takes in quiet for somebody else to pick up the work. And it might be completely subconscious behavior, but it's very common. At one point in my life, I worked for a newspaper. I was a reporter. And the first thing that you learn when you are a newspaper reporter and you're going to interview someone is ask a question and don't say anything else. Sit in quiet. People hate quiet and they will fill the gap with talk and they will say things and they will just keep going. And at work around task assignment, they'll get really quiet because they're not going to be the one that breaks and says, oh, I'll do it. Right? Because they know that someone like Danny is going to put up her hand right away and say, oh, I'll just do that. Right? And you jump in and they get used to you jumping in. So then later, when you say to them, well, who would like to take this? They're like, well, I'm just going to sit here quiet. You can do it. Or I'll just say, well, you do it because you do it all the time anyway. So we've trained them really, really well to just push it back. So what you can do in that situation is say, no, let's decide what work we have to do. and who has capacity to do it, and assign it. And here's where the fear of conflict can come in, because you don't want people unhappy. But if you looked at everybody's schedule and you decided that somebody was coming up to the end of doing something else and had a little window of opportunity, you could assign it to them, or you could break it into pieces and give everybody a chunk so it's equal. Right? You could do it as a team in a meeting. Like sometimes it takes not much time once you get everybody in the room and you just power through it. But if you let if you let people respond, they will be quiet. Very quiet. Because they know somebody else will be uncomfortable in the quiet and stick their hand up. We're so good at that. So good at it. And you'd be amazed what people will say to you when you ask a question and you don't talk after that. And you sit there and you force yourself to stay quiet. They'll just start, because people hate sitting in the quiet.
It's interesting because I got feedback recently that because I was getting so frustrated with my team around, like they would ask questions that there was resources, things that we had already talked about, things that were already in chat about, and they would ask the question. And I was getting frustrated because it was like, you guys are all leaders. You're supposed to have this information. Why are you always coming to me for the question, like for the answer?
Yeah.
So like, I see so much in that last thing that says this can lead to resentment from you and towards you from others who feel you undervalue their ability. It's like I just was feeling so much frustration towards them, because it was like, go look it up. Like, why are you coming to me?
Well, and it's a bit of learned helplessness, right?
That's what it felt like. It felt like these are all leaders that should be able to support. And then the questions would come where it was just like, oh, for God's sake, like we just talked about this like 3 months ago. There's a whole post in the chat around all of this. There's a whole guidebook that you can access. There's all of these things. And I just felt this like, and then the feedback was that I was, not providing the answers to the team, and that they felt that that was dismissive. And it was, so it's just that circular thing around.
Well, and you probably want to take all of this information and go back and talk to your teams about how they also embody all of this information and response, and how they feel coming back to you. Right? I mean, you're not the only one feeling this. You're not the only one feeling burnt out. You are just the only one acknowledging it at the moment. Right? Their behavior still screams burnout.
Yeah.
When it's easier just to ask somebody else what to do instead of go looking it up yourself, which is totally not a trait of leadership, it signals that they too are in the same situation and just are not aware enough or acknowledging it.
There's an interesting piece to that too, with like, if someone comes to you and says, well, this is not working, this is a problem, like, how are you going to fix that? The response should be something like, oh, okay, I hear what you're saying. How about we work on this together and see what we can come up with? Tell me what you have for ideas already. And then because I'm really trying to empower my staff to be a part of it and to know what I do in the day-to-day job, and to know how all the systems work, so that when I am off, places not going to fall down without me. And so then the piece I was talking to before is I'm trying to set up this orientation binder. I'm on my 3rd email out going, okay, who else wants to take a topic? We want to do this by spring. So, but I just keep empowering them and giving them opportunity. And I might have done I might have to try this, asking the question and sitting quietly.
So my question would be, and what do you suggest we do differently?
Right. Yeah. And then I'm happy to work with you on that.
And then sit in the quiet.
Right.
Because the easiest thing for people to do is to say, what are you going to do about this?
Right.
And you're like, well, I'm not God. So, first of all, I'm not God, and we're not going to be fixing anything like fundamentally, but what would you suggest we do differently?
Right.
And just ask them that every single time, because there's an obligation on other people to not just come with a problem, but to come with what the hell is the problem and what would you think would be a better way to do it? You can't just throw out that it's not working and leave it at that. It's just, that's not on. Right? Because that's just abdicating any responsibility for highlighting the problem. If you have no solution, shut up. Right? Honest to God.
It was so weird. I had one meeting where they wanted me to present on what I was doing, and like they invite me sort of in this quarterly thing. And so I didn't know what they, like, there was never really a clear direction on what they actually wanted to hear. And I always felt like I was going and just like, blah.
Yeah.
So I went to a meeting, the meeting, I didn't come prepared for anything. And I said, I just like to take the opportunity for the time that you've given me to ask you, what do you want for me to bring forward? What do you need to hear? What would help you? And they all sort of just sat in silence. And then, you know, one or two people said something about what would be helpful to them or things that they felt would be helpful. And I got a phone call and a text message after the meeting asking if I was okay.
I know. So
it's so different. Like, are you okay? And I was like,
yeah.
I don't know what you guys want from me. Like, I don't know what is going to help you, because if I come continually, there's always these questions about what to do. And, you know, what, like all of these like questions that you could go and find the answers. That's all like available, but that doesn't, it, you know, so then I got this like, well, are you okay?
So here's kind of the weird little secret out there. What I have really discovered is often they don't even know. So where you find your power is you don't ask them what they want to know. You just tell them what you want them to know. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. If they have problems with it, they'll tell you and you can adjust it. But honest to God, so I had exactly the same situation. They were rolling out this big new process, and this executive director wanted to sit every week on a call and have us bring information to her. My first question was, what is it that she would like to know? They could never describe it. Honest to God, they could never describe it. So then you have to decide, well, how do I go to these meetings when I don't even know what I'm supposed to bring? So you just decide, if they're not going to tell me what they want, I am going to provide what I think is important. And wait and see, you know, if that lands. Because a lot of times they haven't thought through what they're asking you. And unless you're reporting on metrics that are really specific, you have KPIs that are trackable or whatever, if you have more intangible things, they have no idea what to ask you. So you take control of that, and you take the lead in what you feed back to them. They'll let you know if it's not helpful or if they need other things as well. But 90% of the time, they don't know what they want and they don't know what they need. So
well, I think that's where the frustration must come around people pleasing, is because you want to please them.
Exactly. And they don't know what they want or need.
You know, you want to be able to fill their need and they don't even know what they want. And then it becomes frustrating because you're like, well,
yeah.
And then, or they're not happy with what you bring forward. So you bring forward something like, oh, we're just not happy with that. And you're like,
that's fine. So explain to me. So then you at least have an opening for the conversation, and you can ask the question and sit in silence again. You can ask the question, okay, so that wasn't what you needed. Can you explain a bit more to me what it is that would help you more? And then sit in silence and wait. Now, the sitting in silence makes you extremely uncomfortable. So have a little script in your head. I'm just going to wait. I'm just waiting for them. I'm just waiting for them, or something that you say to yourself so you don't start filling in the gaps, because that's what happens. And then you start to just talk. Let them do that. Just sit there and wait. And if you sit there for a very long time and nothing comes back and they're looking very uncomfortable, if you had a couple of other things that you wanted them to know, you could offer those things. Well, what about if I brought this forward or that? but make sure that you are in control of that conversation. So you have gone from reporting to leading the meeting. Okay. It's a very tricky and somewhat sly way of being a leader, because what you're doing is you're changing the power dynamic in the room, right? You're embodying your position and your leadership ability, and you are presenting that in a way that will be very hard for them to, if they haven't given you an outline of what they want, it will be very hard for them to counter what it is that you tell them, because they don't know what they want. And you can help them narrow it down by doing that. So I'm going to read out these questions, and you think about them to yourself and see if any of these resonate with you. Have I ever not gotten a task done on time because I've been working on something for someone else? Do I feel obligated to do a task when asked, even though I know my other work will suffer in timing, quality, or attention? Do I feel that I cannot speak up about the excess work request because I fear a negative response? Do I think that my performance review or even my employment could be jeopardized by saying no or not at this time? Do I offer something when no one else steps up because someone has to do it? And do I think I'm helping out someone who's overworked by doing this task? These are really important variations on people pleasing and rationales for doing it. And the most important couple of ones that I like to talk about at this point are the ones about fearing a negative response because I said no to something. And do I think that my performance review will be jeopardized by my saying no? So there's a couple, we're going to talk about boundaries and a couple of ways of managing that fear and outcome shortly, in the next section, because there's a couple of things that you can say that make it very difficult for you to get more work without having somebody else consider the work you're already doing. Okay. So let's talk about how to stop being a people pleaser, because all of that other, it was tough. It just, it may have stirred up a lot of emotions for you. I don't know if you need to have a breathing break or if you're okay to go. Sometimes this gets people very, very anxious because it's just such a fundamental core piece of people's personality that it makes them hugely nervous to think about saying no to taking something on, or to not being the one that steps in and puts their hand up when something else comes down the pipe. Okay. So as long as you're feeling grounded enough, we can just keep going. We're good? Okay. So there is a very common association in our brains between thinking that people pleasing means being a good team member. So a lot of people think that they have to people please to be a good team member. But this can be very serious, can have very serious implications, because if your team isn't strong individually and a people pleaser constantly steps in to pick up all the work so people look good, and that person burns out, the whole team will fail because nobody else has had to, develop the skills or the capacity to do things, because this other person is just taking all this stuff on. And sometimes they take so much on that it doesn't get done and it looks bad for everybody. But not completing your own work on time and working really long hours, even at home, to try to keep up, or doing work that isn't the greatest quality, those can all be results of people pleasing, and taking on more than you can handle. And fundamentally, there can be serious impacts to your family and your home life. Okay. And sometimes by taking on all of these responsibilities and trying to do all of this work, the one thing that we are doing is hiding the fact that a different solution is required. So how many times have you had someone leave a job and they've had to hire 2 or 3 people to replace them? Because the work that person had was unsustainable and unrealistic. But because they kept taking it on, there were no flags in the system strong enough to make the system respond until the person left. And then everybody else looked at the job and went, are you kidding? So the other piece of this is that what we talked about a minute ago is that sometimes what happens in a team is that the team knows the people pleasers and they will step back and stay quiet until the people pleasers step up and take on the work. And that's their way of managing their own workload. So it creates this dichotomy in the team of people who are the takers and the pleasers, and the people who are the ones who kind of protect their little area and the work that they're doing. So this is where it can get quite personal. We really need to figure out where your need to please people comes from. And the thing is, it mostly comes from your very first relationship as a very small child. And your very first relationship either with your parents or whomever raised you. So in this part, if you have come from an abusive background, I'd strongly suggest that you don't engage in this a lot unless you're working with a therapist, because I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach. And sometimes this can bring up a lot of things for people, because this is your first fundamental life-giving relationship, and you were trained in it how to get what you needed. Okay, if your parents used love or the withholding of love to get you to do what they wanted, this is what starts to create the ability to please people. And then it molds our patterns of behavior towards getting the love and the care that we need. So it's rooted really, really deeply in our childhood, this whole people. And then with women, there's a whole other layer of the nurturing, the mothering, the caring for. And it was interesting, in another boot camp, there was a woman who had this revelation at this point about how when she was like 7 or 8 years old, put into a care relationship with her smaller siblings, and how that made her mother happier because her mother was under a lot of stress. So there was a lot of that ability. And so sometimes it's just really acknowledging where it comes from so that you can comfort that child and make sure that that child knows that they are still safe, but that they don't need to behave like that anymore, because it's not so critical for for continuing on. So when you think about how you feel when you can't say no to someone, or you rush in to help someone, can you find a memory where you may have learned that behavior? Try to think about a memory where you had to help someone, or that you felt like you couldn't say no about doing something, even if it didn't feel good at the time. Because what we're going to find is that you have a belief that's firing that leads you to make a decision and do some actions that get you a specific result, right? So remember that a belief is just a thought and emotion that you just can keep having. And when you have it long enough, it fires automatically without you knowing it, especially when you are in stressful situations. And your subconscious is just firing this belief and then filtering back all the evidence that you need to support it. And from that belief, you make some decisions. You make a decision to put your hand up, you make a decision to take that job on, or you make a decision not to. But whatever decision you make and whatever action you take gets you the result that you get, whether it's the result you wanted or not. So the biggest thing is if you're going to focus on this for the thing that you want to work on, when you are looking for that deep childhood memory, pay particular attention to all of the sensory parts of it. Like, where were you? What were you wearing? What was the sounds you heard? What are the smells you can smell? Was there any touch or feeling or tactile things? What were the conversations that you could hear? Where was the location? And just really pull yourself up out of the situation to be that narrator or on the mountain looking down on it, and ask yourself, what thoughts and emotions can you remember having? And try to think about how this could play into people-pleasing behavior that you may want to change now. And ask yourself, what results did that situation get you? Did it get you loving attention? Did it get you anger? Did it get you indifference? And how did that shape what you did next? Okay. So when you start to look at that, you can start to pull back and see maybe where the belief is. So if I help people, people will like me better. If I do this work, I will be seen as a better team member or a more a valuable leader, or there's all kinds of things that you could be thinking that come from your very first relationships where you pleased people or not, and what the result was from that situation. And then sometimes you can break with that behavior because you've discovered it by starting to think, I'm a lot more independent now, and it feels good to be independent. So I believe that I am a good leader, and a good leader helps people to do their work, and a good leader does their own work. You can practice that. Now, one of the things is, when you are practicing to change a belief, it takes a bit of time. It's kind of like changing a habit. And it depends on what you read, but it could be anywhere from 20 times to 67 times that you practice this belief consciously before it starts to become more automatic. So it feels quite clunky at first. Like, it's actually, you got to catch that thought, the first belief that you have to forcefully tell yourself, that's not what I want to believe anymore, and I want to believe this for a while. So it feels quite clunky because it's not smooth, like your subconscious is just firing it. But after a while, it starts to feel better and better, and it starts to get easier to do. So this is why I suggest you only pick one thing to try to focus on in the boot camp, for at least until you get really good at it. Okay. So, is everybody doing okay? Okay. So now if we think, okay, so I got some people pleasing things I want to fix. So what do I do? So first of all, in the situation, think of your own needs first. So somebody comes and says, I have this job that needs to be done, or this task, or whatever. Think of your own needs first. Make an inventory in your head of what you are currently doing and how important it is ranked compared to this new thing. Before you say anything, examine your intention behind saying it. Ask yourself why you want to help out in this situation. Oh, excuse me, I can get a drink of water. Ask yourself if there is something triggering your helping behavior. Is it that you're tired Is it that you're afraid that if it doesn't get done quickly, it will look bad for the team or for you personally? Is there a trigger? Sometimes the triggers are subtle and sometimes they're not. So ask yourself that. Then try to wait and to be asked for help. Don't jump in right away. Try and if it comes to your team, try asking others for help doing it. The good one is be friendly without stepping in. Offer suggestions on how to get it done or who could do it, but don't take it on yourself. And then the big one, which is what we're going to talk about here in a minute, set some boundaries that you can maintain. And the thing that boundaries are like fences. You have to maintain them for them to be useful. Okay, so we've had a lot of boundary talks in our life. I think every course you take, somebody talks about boundaries, but they're really, really important. Because boundaries are the best definition I've ever heard. They are the limits we set with other people to indicate what we find acceptable and unacceptable in their behavior towards us. So our boundaries set our expectation of how we're going to be treated, period. Okay. They tell other people that. They tell other people what your expectation is of the treatment of yourself and how much you value yourself. Okay. They will give you a better relationship with your team and with your direct supervisor or executive. But it sounds easy. And actually, it takes a lot of work to maintain some boundaries, because it's very easy when you're a people pleaser to let those boundaries get sloppy. And the first time you let somebody trample over your boundary, you are back at square one and having to rebuild it. Okay. And people will constantly try to breach your boundaries, especially the people who are assigning the work, because they need to get the work done. So here's a couple of things, some tips for setting some really good boundaries. Know that you have permission to prioritize your personal needs. You can say no to things that jeopardize your personal needs. Don't provide an elaborate explanation when you are instituting a boundary. Don't go into a long story about it. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to know. All they want to know is don't cross this fence line. Be friendly, but don't give it away. Do not wait too long to establish it, and always practice what you're going to say about it, both about establishing it and about maintaining it. So here's a good boundary. I go home at 4:30. Like, if that's your home time, I go home at 4:30. That's my boundary. Because A, it's a personal need for me to go home and recharge. And B, there's no amount of work that I'm going to get done between now and or between 4:30 and whenever I go home that's not going to be there again tomorrow. And if you don't set boundaries and demonstrate what the workload actually takes, you're never going to have resolution of the problem, because they're never going to hire anybody else, because you'll just get the work done. Okay. But here's the key. If it's your boss or your executive that is constantly the one or the group that's breaching your own personal boundaries, here's some really cool things that you can do to help maintain them and push back a little bit in a respectful and perfectly reasonable way. So when you're talking to them, prioritize your values. So the first sign that something's going wrong with your boundaries is that you are feeling resentment, discomfort, or guilt. If you're feeling those three things, one of those three things, or all three of them, then something is going on that is kind of crossing your boundary line. And you need to take a moment and think about what's going on. Okay, which is the breathe and pause piece. Breathe and pause. Okay. Communicate clearly and consistently with your boss about these things. I can't do that. Like, this is where creating that response is a really good exercise to try to do, creating a response that you can give back to say, I need to do this for my own well-being. I need to go home at 4:30 for my well-being, and so that I'm a more effective person tomorrow. Okay. Ask questions and be prepared to negotiate. There's always room to negotiate. And the biggest thing to negotiate is, what work can you stop doing to get this other thing done? You don't need to make that decision. Get them to. Say, I need to talk to you about the list of things that I need to do right now. Which are the things that you think that I should leave for now while I'm getting the rest of it done? Because I can't do it all with the quality that we need it to get done by. So you're using positive language that frames the value of the work you're doing, but also the value of it, and asking for input into what can you stop doing. And most importantly, expect some pushback. So practice your response, right? They might say to you, well, it's all important. And just say, well, but I can't possibly get it all done in the way that needs to be done. So I need you to help me prioritize. I've looked at my team and they all have things that can't be let go. So we need to figure out how we're going to do this. Is there a chance of having temporary support? Whatever. Try to negotiate a different result other than you just taking it on and overwhelming yourself. But the problem is that sometimes there will be that time when you have to do that. And so what you need to have prepared is a response. Like, I will do that. I will do this now, but I need you to understand the impact that this is going to have on me personally and the other work that I'm doing. And I can't change that impact. Okay. So you register what's going to happen, right? And you've asked for support in reorganizing what you're doing. And if it still comes to the point where you must do it, you just say, okay, so this is the impact for me. I need you to understand that. I need to tell you what this means. Okay. And at least you have said your piece. And yes, sticking to the boundaries that you set is the most difficult thing, because we're people pleasers and we feel bad about having personal boundaries. And honest to God, I got to tell you that the people that I struggled the most with in working were people who had amazing boundaries. And they would just say, you know what? I don't have the bandwidth for this right now. I can't take it on. And that would be that. There was no kind of apology. There was no kind of explanation. It was just, no, I can't do it. And I hated that. I hated it. But you know why? It's because I couldn't do it. And so I felt obligated to take that work on. And I wasn't obligated to do it. I could too have said, I can't take it on. I just have too much on my plate already. But man, those people bugged me. So if you have someone in your world that bugs you, check to see if that's because they got really good boundaries and it makes you mad because you don't. Okay. And maybe learn something from them. The person that pissed me off the most and had really good boundaries, she's still doing her job because she actually framed it very clearly. And so she didn't burn out. I did, in a spectacular flaming crash kind of way. So who was the smart one? So troubles setting and maintaining boundaries is super common. So in the resources section of the course hub is a boundary chart. If you feel the need to actually physically write out some boundaries that you want to set so that you can remind yourself what they are and reread them in times of frustration and crisis, this is the way to do it. Okay. You can write out what the boundary is, the things you want to say about it, maybe some responses if the push is really hard. And then if you have to do something that breaches that boundary, what are you going to say about it? Just so that you have it written for yourself. Because this can be like super uncomfortable for people who have never done this before. So sometimes it's good to make it awkward at the beginning so that you have to actually think about it and you don't just slip back into your old ways. Just know that boundaries evolve over time. They change. They change depending on who's leading you, who you have on your team. It changes all the time. So this is just a moment in time when you are looking at how can you better craft your day and how people treat you, because boundaries are just expressions of how you expect to be treated. This is just a good way of getting used to that feeling that you're telling people how you expect to be treated and then having them live up to it as much as possible. Okay, so that is the module information for today, which is a ton of stuff to think about. How are you all feeling? Okay. Okay. Do you feel confident to go and have some good thinking time around possible people-pleasing traits and how you could maybe take one or two of them and set some boundaries for yourself? Okay. Anybody have any questions? Yes, it's really a conversation that you have to have with yourself, because the person that breaches your boundaries more than anybody is you. We worry about other people breaching them, but really you're the first one over the fence all the
Because
time.
when I looked at that list about your supervisor, like infringing on your boundaries and all
Yep.
of that, the breach of boundaries is really just me breaching my own boundaries all the time.
Yep.
Which
Which
is
is
why you're afraid of what the fallout might be, you know, if the relationship isn't good or whatever, then
we make up all kinds of stories about what it could be, and it's just stories that we make up. And I bet you money that if you do that exercise where you look at your, some people pleasing situations in your childhood, you are making assumptions based on that and extrapolating them forward onto other people because you're just worried about it. Because you're not confident enough, or you don't value yourself enough to say, this is how I expect to be treated, and then stick to it. But the quickest way to have people breach your boundaries is to breach them first. If you continually backtrack on things that you say around how you expect to be treated by yourself, then nobody's going to believe you. So it's a lot of work. And yeah, what are you going to say to yourself when you breach your own boundaries? Okay, well, that is today. So I have a task for you to do tomorrow. So tomorrow is leaving work at work. So outside of all of this, I have a fun assignment for you. I would like you to sit tonight or tomorrow and make a list of current TV shows that have anything to do with life and nothing to do with work. And next to it, I would like you to make a list of TV shows that only have things to do with work and maybe just skirt around life. And we'll talk about that and the reason for that tomorrow. Tomorrow is actually kind of fun. Hard again. Tomorrow's all about scarcity mindset and the cult of busyness. Okay. And like I said yesterday, don't think that you have to tackle all of these things at the same time. Pick the thing that feels the most needful and work on that. You got the videos will be in the course hub. You can go back and rewatch, like if you get to the end and you think, well, what was the one about people pleasing about? You can go back and watch the video again and pick one thing to work on, because you can't fix everything all at once. And sometimes just by fixing one thing, a lot of other things just miraculously heal themselves. Stop taking on so much work because you're a people pleaser. You'd be surprised how much you get done, and you might not have to take work home because you got time to do your own work. Okay. All right. That's today.
Thank you, Chris.
I will
Yeah.
put the video into the Facebook group as soon as I can get it uploaded, and we will chat again tomorrow. Okay. Same time, same place, ladies.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, Danny, do you want to stay on this line or do you want to go to the other one? I'm gonna just turn off the.
Okay.
Let me
I could-
turn
we
off
could
the
just stay here.
video. Where's the video? Where's my video? Hold on a second. Hold on. Where do we go?